Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I was privileged to sit down with Mayor Dane White. Dane is mayor of the City of Escondido, which is the fourth largest city in the county of San Diego. And at age 33, Mayor White is the youngest mayor in the city's history, and certainly one of the youngest mayors currently in the state of California. Mayor White and I talk about a wide range of issues, including regional collaboration within the county on matters of transportation, drug addiction, homelessness, Mayor White's own personal history of being homeless and being addicted to drugs and alcohol, the role of faith in his life, who his role models are, and much, much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did recording it. Mayor White, welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
I realize you're a little bit out of your neck of the woods in Escondido, and we can get into the fact that Sandag brings you down to San Diego more often than perhaps you anticipated when you got into this role. But I thought if you could start out by just telling us your origin story, a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brings you to the present moment.
All right. It's kind of a long story, so
we
buckle
got time.
Up and be ready.
It's the beauty of this format.
So I was born and raised in Escondido. I'm actually fifth generation. Family moved there shortly after the city was incorporated in 1888. I was fortunate enough to have parents that really cared about me and loved me, and both at one point worked 3 jobs just to put myself and my siblings through private school in Escondido. We all went to Light and Life Christian School, and then after that, or during that time, I guess, parents got divorced, ended up going to public school in 8th grade. And then freshman year, Escondido High School. Sophomore year, again, Escondido High School, except on the second week of school, I was suspended for stealing the principal's golf cart and taking it for a joyride, which ironically, the principal was then the superintendent when I got elected to the high school board. So then I became his boss. It was kind of interesting. Interesting dynamics.
Did he remember the golf cart?
He didn't, but the assistant principal, who was still there, did very much so. So it was kind of funny. And he was friends with my dad in high school too. So goes way back with the family. But at the same time in high school, I started getting wrapped up in drugs and alcohol at a very, very minimal level, but still experimenting. And that's just kind of the group that I fell into. And after I got suspended, my parents thought it was in my best interest to send me to a boarding school in Stockton, Missouri, an independent fundamentalist Baptist boarding school, which was quite the experience. They were actually just recently shut down by the federal government for abuse. So it was a long, miserable ride when I was there.
Like a lockup, like a lockdown kind of a place? Or?
So it's interesting. They really wanted to be a military school. I would say more than half of the kids that were there were court ordered to be there. There was a lot of gang members in there. And you weren't allowed to talk to any of the other students unless a staff member was monitoring your conversation. And even still, it was very limited as to what you were allowed to talk about. Had to be about the Bible, church, or school. And outside of that, there really wasn't any leniency. You spend the vast majority of your days hauling rocks. So you're outside in a single file line. You pick up rocks, walk a quarter mile, dump them into a new pile, and that's what you do all day long.
But you get pretty buff though.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess so. And if you were privileged and you kind of worked your way through the program, you were able to be put on a work crew. So I got put on their painting crew and was responsible for painting staff members' homes. The dorms, the buildings, whatever had to be painted. That's what my crew did. But that's what I did for a year and a half. And if you weren't hauling rocks, you were in school. And school was, I know nobody can see this, but you had a cubicle about the size of this foam thing you got here. And they didn't have any credentialed teachers. You did these packets at your own pace. And after a year and a half, I got my first visit home. Came back to Escondido. Family flew to Hawaii. We vacationed in Hawaii for a week, and after that vacation was done, I just decided I was not going to go back. Went through security to get on my flight, took a seat, and ended up taking off. That was in Los Angeles. I think on that time I took a taxi back to San Diego, laid on the beach for a while, had a friend come pick me up, and then her mom was like, look, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble if you are hiding out at my house. So I have to tell your parents you're here and you didn't go back to school. My dad was actually still in Hawaii, though, so that was poor news to receive on a vacation. And my mom took me in for that week until I could get a new flight back to boarding school. And my dad asked me on that next flight, before I got on the plane, he said, do I need to pay to have somebody escort you to the school? I said, no, Dad, I'm going to go back.
Trust me.
But what he didn't understand is that if I had gone back, I was going to be in a lot of trouble. They don't forgive you for things like that. My life would have been even more miserable than it was being there. So again, went through security, flew to Los Angeles. A friend paid a couple of guys, I think $300 to come pick me up in the middle of the night, drop me off in Escondido, and then, see, my parents know this now, but they didn't for a long time. My sister's boyfriend at the time owned a tattoo shop in town. I went to the tattoo shop. He took me back to his house. I stayed there for, I think, a month, hiding out from my family. I was on every missing persons board in Walmart, Taco Bell, all those kinds of things for several months. After I was done staying at his house, my grandfather actually, who had come to visit me in boarding school and saw how miserable of an experience it was, told me he'd come pick me up, and he did. Picked me up from Valley Center, drove me all the way out to Panguitch, Utah, where I stayed and hid out at his house for the remainder of the summer. At about the time school was going to roll around, we decided it'd be best if I finished that last year of high school. I had gotten way caught up in boarding school because graduating is your ticket out of school. So we ended up calling my parents, calling the Escondido Police Department and saying, look, I'm in Utah, I'm safe. And I told my dad, if you try to send somebody out here to get me, I'll be gone and you'll never see me again. And he kind of just wiped his hands clean and said, you're your grandfather's problem now, not ours. So my grandpa adopted me. I started school. It wasn't long after I started school, I got wrapped up in drugs and alcohol again, was fighting in school a lot. Grandfather ended up kicking me out a short time later. I'm really lucky that I got the amount of schoolwork done in boarding school that I did, because I never went to school my senior year. Still managed to graduate sometime by the skin of my teeth, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks after high school graduation, I ended up getting into some trouble. I was arrested, taken to juvenile hall, and I stayed there for several weeks. I think it was like 2 or 3 months I was there. And after my time was done, I went back to the judge. I was ready to go back to Panguitch, and he was like, look, you're 17. I can't release you. So he called my grandpa, he called my mom, he called my dad, and each one of them said, he is your problem now. And I ended up becoming property of the state of Utah, got stuck in a foster home, and stayed in foster care for about a year. And I got to tell you, I'm thankful for the family that took me in. I learned that there's not a lot of people who are willing to take a 17-year-old male out of juvenile hall and put them in their home.
Who's been running around escaping.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with that story. So they took me in, and for that year, I was solid. No trouble, had a good job, ended up buying a car, and thought I was ready to go out on my own. In fact, I even tried to join the Army. But unfortunately, because I was still dealing with some things in regards to the law, they weren't able to allow me to sign a contract. So chose to get out of foster care. And as soon as I got out and got my own apartment, I got an apartment with the wrong friend and got wrapped up in drugs and alcohol again. It wasn't long after that, I lost my job, I lost my apartment, and I was homeless for basically 18 to 21, going back and forth between Panguitch, Cedar City, Escondido, mooching off of whoever I could mooch off of until they were kind of done with me, and went back and forth, sleeping in a shed, a wooden shed on the side of somebody's house in Panguitch. Slept behind the 7-Eleven. I say this a lot, so people have probably already heard it, but I slept behind the 7-Eleven on Center City and Broadway in Escondido, or Center City and Country Club, excuse me. Just going back and forth, trying to figure out why, this is terrible to say, but why was life even worth living? I was miserable, lost. Nobody would talk to me. homeless from time to time, just trying to figure life out until my very last trip to Utah. I got arrested again for public intoxication. This was the fourth or fifth time. And standing in front of the judge, and he finally said, you need to go to rehab. You've got a problem. I've seen you too many times, and we want you to get some help. And instead of going to rehab, I just said I'll never come back to the state of Utah again, and I went back to Escondido. Shortly after that, I had an experience one night. I overdosed, and distinctly remember hearing this voice tell me, you know, if you keep going, you are going to die. And asked my mom if I could sleep at her place for a little while. She gave me a futon in her garage, and I checked into the North County Inland Regional Recovery Center. And for 5 months, did everything I was supposed to. Quit smoking cigarettes, quit drinking, quit doing drugs, ditched all my friends, and really started to see some success in my life. During that time in rehab, I met a girl in church who, her and her dad really befriended me and took me in. They introduced me to the other daughter who came home from college, and that girl is now my wife. I met all my best friends, and the rest is kind of history with that. And my father-in-law, who I'm now fortunate enough to serve on the Escondido City Council with, pretty much saved my life. You know, took me in when I had nothing, when he had no reason to give me a chance, did so, and I credit him and my mother-in-law for giving me the life that I now have. Shortly after getting baptized and graduating from rehab, he encouraged me to serve a 2-year mission for the Mormon Church, for which I did, that he paid for generously. Spent 2 years out backpacking in the Midwest, as I like to call it, in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri, and then came back home. My wife and I were engaged 8 days upon me returning home, and shortly after our wedding, I ran for school board, was fortunate enough to win that, won my re-election 2 years ago, and then decided it was my turn to run for mayor last year, which was, I didn't think it was actually in the cards, but apparently it was, because I'm sitting here now. So, and like I said, the rest is history.
And somewhere along the line, you also started a business.
Yes, correct. In and out of construction, I feel like that's where most people addicted to drugs and alcohol manage to find a job, is in construction. So that's what I did. Started out doing steel framing for a commercial company here, but eventually found my way into flooring, and started Whiteworks Flooring, doing hard surface flooring installations and resurfacing throughout the county. I had to give that up to run for mayor, and we can get into that a little later if you want, but had to give that up, and ultimately I'm here. And I really have no desire to go back to that. I was pretty miserable with my life, even though I was making good money, and COVID really screwed everything up in that industry. Everything became too expensive. I couldn't find anybody to work for me, and this has provided a new opportunity, but I believe will open more doors to keep going down this path in the future.
So were you raised Mormon, or are you converted?
Absolutely not. I was not raised Mormon.
I was going to say, I didn't want to cast aspersions in your direction, but your behavior as a young man was not in keeping with Mormon teachings, right?
No doubt. No, actually, private school was Methodist. We went to the Nazarene Church for a long time growing up. I was actually the drummer for the Escondido Nazarene Church growing up. And then I said I was in the Baptist boarding school. Yeah. And once I had gotten out of there, I really had no taste for any religion. But, at some point you find yourself wanting something new in life. And that was the opportunity that got presented.
And what's the role that religion plays in your life on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, it's my personal moral compass. I'm sure you've seen the San Diego Temple, big white-looking castle.
Up near UCSD.
Yes. Yeah. In order to go in the temple, you're asked a series of questions. Are you a full tithe payer? Are you honest in your dealings with your fellow men? And questions similar to that. And that's what governs my personal day-to-day decision-making.
Thank you for sharing that, the wide swings really in your biography. As a young man, you've lived many lives. It sounds like,
no doubt,
and appreciate it comes through in your story, your gratitude for where you are currently, and we'll get into the specifics of your work as mayor in a minute. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the concept of homelessness. It's a hot button issue in the county of San Diego, in the city of San Diego, really statewide and nationally. And there are all these myriad proposed solutions to it. Tiny houses. Let's buy a bunch of hotels and convert them. Let's ship people to different states. Let's ship people across the bridge from Coronado to downtown San Diego, and on and on and on. And I saw in one of your profiles that you talked about the fact that there's a certain percentage of folks who are homeless who, no matter what's presented to them, will choose to remain that way. But then there's the big kind of middle of the bell curve that aren't in that category. Could you talk to us about what you take from your own personal experiences of homelessness and how that's informing your thinking around some solutions to this? Because Escondido has a fairly large homeless population.
Yeah, we do. Unfortunately, it's an interesting. This is an interesting topic because much like everything else, it's gotten political, right? And so you sort of have to plant your stake on one side and say, this is the reason why everybody's homeless. But that's just not the case. I'm of the belief that people are homeless primarily in San Diego County because of some sort of trauma or addiction or things of that nature. I have a hard time believing that there are people, the majority are just down on their luck or the rent got too high. And the reason I say that is because, for about a 2-year period in Escondido, I was managing a commercial piece of property, and I talked to 200 homeless individuals, and vast majority in my personal experience and interacting with the people on the streets in my city is that there is a massive drug problem going on, and there are no resources or not enough resources to sort of take care of that situation. And unfortunately, the solutions to this have gotten political, right? So there's one side that says housing first is the only answer. Well, I do believe that housing first works for some people. It didn't work for me. I was given the opportunity several times. Then there's the other side that thinks that people just need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and figure it out. And I don't think that either one of those ideas serves the majority of the people who are struggling on our streets. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. For me and for my city, what I would like to see happen is I would like to see the city itself fund a shelter. And the reason that's important to me, the self-funding, is because unfortunately, if you accept the county dollars to open a shelter, that's a regional shelter. So the problem I'm having in Escondido is I have a service provider, I have a shelter, but because that's there, I believe it's drawing in more and more. Naturally, people are going to go where they can get resources. And that's fine, but we're never getting anywhere with the problem itself. So I would like to see the city of Escondido fund just a basic shelter. Beds, storage, bathrooms, showers, food, basic necessities to have people's needs met. And beyond that, it's kind of a county or even a state problem beyond that, because the city can't be expected to provide mental health services or addiction recovery services. We just don't have the resources for that. And frankly, Escondido doesn't have the resources for a shelter yet, but I have a strategy that's going to get us there eventually. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
It does. And I was going to extend from that to ask you the budget question.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a strategy, you say. I noted that it looks like in the short to medium term, Escondido may be facing some budget challenges. Could you speak a little bit about that and how that relates to your future plans for addressing homelessness with a self-funded?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we have a projected structural deficit of about $10 million. And unfortunately, last year, there was a revenue measure on the ballot that failed. This year, there's talks of a citizen-driven initiative to help solve that problem. But if that doesn't pass, the onus is really on the city council. And what I want to say first, before I answer that question, is I've got a lot of people that come up to me and they're upset about some of the cuts that are eventually going to have to be made. And they're upset with me. I'm upset with everybody who came before me that put us in this position. And it's a shame that the 33-year-old school board member has to come in and fix it. But it is what it is, and I'm looking forward to it. But there are some potential revenue sources that the city of Escondido currently doesn't take advantage of. I personally am okay with recreational cannabis being brought into the city. The deal that they had set up a couple of years ago that the city council voted down would have brought in a guaranteed $2 million a year through fixed fees, plus the sales tax revenue. Well, that right there is enough to fund what I would need to do for homelessness. And that's just one idea. We have a Costco coming in that's going to bring in about $1.5 million a year. We're looking at hotels to invite in. We did a study that says that the city of Escondido could support a full-service hotel if brought in. So there are things that are going to happen. It's just a matter of time before we hit that fiscal cliff. But I'm not even convinced that I'll have to worry about that in my first term.
What led to the structural deficit? Was it uncontrolled hiring, pension obligations? Pensions.
Unfortunately, yeah. We have a massive pension obligation that's unfunded.
Like many, if not all, public entities, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's a PERS, Public Employee Retirement System. And
it is, yeah. And there's a point where that in and of itself will be behind us, but we just need to get through that period of time where things get bad.
In addition to the very real and very significant large challenge of homelessness, what other priorities take up your time as mayor in Escondido?
So I'm 33. I have a wife. I have 2 little girls. They're 6 and 3. And one of the most common concerns that I hear from my constituents is there's nothing for young families to do. So I think we have some pretty great parks, but you can only go to the park so many times, right? Families want other options. We have the Children's Discovery Museum, but not everybody can afford to go there. Some people don't want to go there. I'm really focused on bringing in new opportunities for young families. And I wish I could go into detail, but I am working on 2 enormous opportunities for young families in the city of Escondido that I'll be happy to announce in the coming, hopefully weeks, but if not months. But there are opportunities to bring in more young, educated families to help support the city and at the same time provide others with things to do.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the focus on the needs of young families. What does a day in the life of the mayor of Escondido look like? I mean, when Escondido is a large city in the context of the county, but it's certainly not on everybody's map of cities across the state or across the country, right? So people may, I don't know, we probably get our impression of what mayors do based on shows like Parks and Rec, right? so that's a TV sitcom. But take us through a day in the life of the mayor.
All right. Well, I like to get up between 6 and 7. I like to have breakfast with my family, and then I head out. I'm usually in my office in the mornings for a little while, signing paperwork, doing emails, things like that. But I do like to leave on foot quite often, and I'll just go walk around and talk to business owners. I like to get a feel for what's going on in the business community. And then, throughout the day, I just set up meetings with people who can help me achieve my goals, whether that's friends, business owners, other politicians. It's kind of just a series of meetings from day to day. And then I try to block out 11 to 1, 2 days a week so I can go to jiu-jitsu practice. But
nice.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing jiu-jitsu?
A couple years.
For the sake of our listeners who are like, what the heck is that noise? This is not a building in Escondido that's under construction for a new, one of the mayor's plans. This is the building in which our studio is housed, and we're having core samples taken. So I thought it wouldn't happen today, but thank you to the listeners for your forbearance with this, and to Mayor White as well. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the concept of addiction and fentanyl. And I'm going to put you on the spot. Were you a fentanyl user?
Fentanyl wasn't really around when I was in the game. It's fairly new, and quite frankly, I'm really thankful that it wasn't there with all the horror stories I'm hearing about or that I've even seen when I'm out on a ride along and I'm watching somebody get Narcan administered, it's absolutely terrible. And the thing about addiction is it's one of those things that it is impossible to understand unless you've been through it yourself, or you've had a close friend or a family member, but still it's hard to grasp, right? Because people don't understand. So I'm often asked, like, why did you do drugs? Because they make you feel great. They make you feel like you fit in. They make you social. They make you feel good physically. And it's hard. Once you're in that cycle of, I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to go to bed. And when you wake up, you're trapped in that cycle again. And you can never get out. Every day you tell yourself, I don't want this anymore. I really don't. I want to live a normal life. I want to have friends. I want to see my family. But outside of those thoughts, the only thing that's running through your head is that next fix. And you cannot break that mental cycle. And to be trapped in it is one of the most suffocating, lonely things that you could ever experience. So when I look at people on the streets in my city, my heart goes out to them. I may disagree with other political leaders on how to solve this problem, but my heart breaks for everybody who is trapped in that cycle. And it is near impossible to get out without assistance.
As a Republican, it sounds like, and maybe you could expand on this a little bit, it sounds like some of your views around addiction and the need for treatment centers and your views around housing might not be entirely aligned with what we think of traditional Republican thinking, small government, perhaps let churches handle some of this, and certainly in a city with a looming budget challenge. How do you align, or how do you proceed with your work and still garner the support of Republicans? Or perhaps that's less important to you?
No, I wouldn't say it's less important to me. Well, maybe it is. What's most important to me is getting the job done. And I'm not entirely even sure what a Republican stance on substance abuse treatment would be. I'm just going off of my own experience.
Right.
And I'm actually, in my experience with the county Republican Party and talking about my experience with addiction, everybody I've spoken to has been very receptive and supportive and has encouraged me to use my experience to make a change in my community. Here's where I think I break from a traditional Republican stance. I don't believe, I know I already said this, but I don't believe 99% of the people can just pick themselves up by their bootstraps. I think that's the common thing for Republicans. We want to be independent. We want to be in charge, right? But with addiction, again, you can't do that. Well, and here's the other thing. There are a number of people who need to be either assisted medically or in a supervised withdrawal. You know, I tend to avoid the extremes. And if you've been on fentanyl or heroin or meth or whatever, if you've been on those drugs for several years, to just up and quit is an extreme position. It's very difficult and it's almost never successful. I am in favor of supervised, of like a supervised detox, right? There are some people who would be able to function in society while slightly intoxicated. Happens all the time. In fact, if you're listening, there's probably somebody at your work who is a recreational drug abuser that you just don't know.
That's right.
And I think that would be very successful. But in order to do that, people are going to need a place to stay. They're going to need, like I said, their basic needs met. I'm not an advocate of housing first and building housing and giving it to people and paying them and then hoping that they seek treatment. I don't think that would be successful either. But I do think that we need to offer that opportunity to have just your basic needs met. Man, clean up, get fed, get some counseling, whatever you need to just function throughout the day. Let's get those needs met and then progress from there.
Are there any models that you look to I know there's a lot of failed models, right, for how to address addiction and homelessness and how those are overlaid. But are there models that you look to around the country or around the world, cities or countries that have figured this out?
Yeah, and I can't remember. It's one of the examples people use all the time, but I can't remember the country in Europe who was it that legalized all drugs?
Yeah, the Netherlands.
Okay.
I know Portugal's taken a similar approach.
One of those regions, I read a book about a guy who went out there, and originally his intent was to do a story on how it was a failed program. But when he went there, he found they go in, anybody can go in, they'll give you the drugs, they'll give you what you need, and then they go out, they function in society, they can come back as many times as they need to, but I think something like 90% of the people who went in there eventually stopped coming. That's successful to me. That's far beyond what we're doing here. And then there was a company in California, Sovereign Health, and they did all kinds of addiction treatment services. And I was a resident manager for them for, I don't know, about a year. So I managed a home up in Orange County for 8 to 9 people who were trying to seek treatment for drug abuse. And one of the things that they offered there was medically assisted treatment, Suboxone. Things like that have major potential to work. But it's just one piece of the puzzle. And I think that's the problem with our county specifically right now is we're just trying to plug holes as they come instead of taking an approach that would move people forward.
I think of a case, and I'm not trying to call out which city, so I won't say the city, but a city in the South Bay. And I was watching kind of stories about a park that had become, for the most part, overrun by homeless folks. And eventually people go to the city council and they complain, they take videos, they go there. And I think the superintendent weighed in because there was a school down the street. So the city then says, okay, we're going to fence off the park. No one can go in the park. Now, no one can go in the park, not just no homeless people. So then they fence it off, have security guards there. It's $500,000 a year. And that was the solution. And I recently drove by there, and down the street from the park now is a tent city. And it just seems hopeless, right? It seems like a hopeless pushing around of a problem and a challenge. And I know it's not for a lack of effort, and it's also not for a lack of political will. I lived for a long time and still work in the city of San Diego, and I've seen what's happened with downtown and Mayor Gloria and his efforts. And I know they've got some now city designated camping areas that they're trying to fill. But last thing I read is that they can do intake for 3 people a day. You got several thousand documented living in downtown. So assuming that all several thousand wanted to go in there, which isn't the case, but even with that, it just seems like tiny Band-Aids around this gaping wound. Do you happen to know the homeless count in Escondido?
Unsheltered right now is, I think, something like 358.
Okay, for a city of, what's the total population of Escondido?
150,000.
Okay, so it's a fairly sizable population, mostly concentrated in the downtown.
Yeah, it's really in just a small handful of spots. So we've got a tent city on one side of town right now, and it's in a creek that's kind of secluded with bushes and everything. But unfortunately, that's right next to a residential community. And then it's really bad under the freeways and next to the freeways, and then along the creek through town. And here's the thing, if you don't mind, I want to.
Yeah.
If I had the perfect world for Escondido, if I had all the money in the world right now, I could solve this. There's 2 problems. Number one is whatever the root cause is of people being on the streets, whatever that is, right? But the other problem is the aesthetics. Nobody wants to move to a city that when you pull in on the side of the freeway are homeless people everywhere. In order to solve the aesthetics, people need a place to go. I would build a shelter right now. I would house every single one of them. Just like I said, showers, bathrooms, clothes, food, and storage. All your basic needs are met. No requirement to be sober. Come as you are. And what that does is it allows the city to enforce an encampment ban. Let me also say, with an encampment ban, I am not in favor. Jail is not the place for homeless people. It's not the place for drug addicts. I'm not in favor of taking people to jail. And in fact, right now, the jail doesn't seem to want to take anybody for anything. So I think too often when people hear encampment ban, oh, you want to arrest homeless people. Absolutely not. But they can't stay right there. It's affecting everybody's quality of life. So if we have the opportunity to enforce an encampment ban, and then from there, the onus is on the individual if they want to seek help, but if the treatment options are available, we'll give it to them all day long. And if somebody is willing to say, okay, I'm in this shelter, I want to get help, they go through a rehab program, they're successful, I would build a tiny home community for those people. That's the next step in their life. The approach is sort of like a ladder, right? You've got to take these steps to get out of the problem, and that's what I'm willing to do. And what's really important about that is it allows the city to say, look, you can't come in here anymore. The region has to come together. Every city has to come together with solutions. Escondido, whose average household income is $30,000 below the county average, can't be expected to take in $600. I am more than willing to do our fair share and put each one of those people in a comfortable shelter like that, with more options beyond that, if all the pieces just need to come together.
It's so how do we get there?
Money. Will
you get there?
Yes, I'm confident we will.
I appreciate your bold approach, and also the fact that you're willing to at least address the topic of jail and the role of law enforcement in things like camping bans. What is the overall role that you see? Because now you supervise the Escondido police.
No, we're not there.
Okay, how does that work? How does that? They have their own.
The police chief answers to the city manager.
Okay.
Now the city manager does answer to us, but that's his responsibility. Yes.
So the structure, and forgive me for my ignorance, but the structure in Escondido is, as mayor, you have a seat on the city council.
Correct. I'm one of 5.
You're one of 5. So that's distinct from a structure like San Diego with a strong mayor model.
And a lot of people don't understand that.
Okay.
Todd Gloria's role is much different than mine because he is essentially the city manager, and all of the city employees answer to him. I have 2 employees, the city manager and the city attorney, and that's it. And real quick, just to go back a second, when you talk about the role of jails are for criminals. If somebody is on drugs, I don't believe that should be a crime. I don't think the government should be telling us what to put in or what not to put in our bodies. And if somebody wants to get high, that's their prerogative. But committing consistent crimes while high is a problem for the community. But a jail is not the place for somebody to get help. It just isn't. Maybe you could make an argument for somebody who has lost complete control of their ability to make rational decisions temporarily because they are that intoxicated. Maybe they need to go in the drunk tank. But beyond that, I have a hard time arresting people for drugs or for being homeless.
And that's a stance that's not without its controversy as well.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. I picked up that you're not afraid. You're not afraid of controversy. So let's dip into another topic that at times can have controversy associated with it: charter schools.
Yes.
So you were a board member for 6 years, you said.
Yes.
And could you tell us about your perspective on your stance on charter schools and their relationship with traditional district schools, and kind of what your mental framework was as you were a school board member and these topics came up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't know a whole lot about education when I ran for school board. I just wanted to be involved. And when I got in there, I was elected to a board that has historically been known as very charter friendly. For me personally, I was in a unique spot. I received the endorsement of our teachers' unions running for re-election. It was important to me to have a good relationship with them. Regardless of how I feel about unions or their politics, we are partners. And it doesn't do us any good to bicker back and forth if we can help it. With that being said, I'm also a proponent of choice. Because public schools, while they can serve the vast majority of the general public, and successfully, I would add, there are some who would benefit from something different. And whether that's homeschool, charter school, private school, whatever the case may be, it's important for kids to have the options, and families to have the options that support their needs. And full disclosure, my wife is a charter school employee. She's a high school special education teacher at one of the local charter schools in Escondido.
It's interesting, and that's an example of collaboration across the political aisle, right? Is traditionally organized labor, teachers' unions haven't necessarily always supported Republican candidates. The assumption is that the Republican candidates will be more charter-friendly, among other things, or perhaps quote-unquote anti-union. So I think it speaks to your openness politically to be able to garner that support.
I think it's important to state also that as charter-friendly as I am, when I found out there were charter schools operating in the city after the law changed, you had to be chartered with the city you're operating in. When I found out that there were new charter schools popping up illegally, I reported them. Absolutely. We all need to work together, and the law is the law. So, again, as pro-charter as I am, I approved every renewal that came to the school board. We all got to play by the same rules.
Being the youngest mayor, you probably get tired of hearing this, but being the youngest mayor, I think in the history of Escondido, right?
I think so. That's what they tell me.
You're probably one of the youngest in the state, if not the youngest. What are some unique challenges that you have faced in going about your daily duties, as well as what are some real opportunities that your youth and enthusiasm bring?
Yeah, the problems mainly came during the campaign. And, at the time, I announced there's 32, or maybe even 31 when we announced. And I am the son-in-law of the most senior council member. And I didn't go to college. So it was sort of a recipe for just an overall distrust for me. And I was not well known, even though I was on the school board, one small little district on the side of the city. It was very hard for people to be willing to give me a chance. A lot of people didn't know where I stood politically. They didn't know how I would handle running meetings or any of the things that go along with that. But what I will say is 6 months into the job now, a lot of the people who have been around Escondido for a long time and historically have been the decision makers, a lot of them have come to me saying that they are pleasantly surprised. I hear all the time that I'm getting stuff done and things changed at City Hall. So what was sort of a drag is now a positive. And the things that my youth affords me is I can be everywhere. I'm young enough that I'll start my meetings at 7 a.m. and I'll keep going till 9 o'clock if I have to. And I'm also fortunate enough with that. My wife works at that charter school. She only has to be in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Her office is literally across on the other side of the park. So I can see her frequently through the week. I have my kids through the week. So it's not like I'm out there doing this by myself, right? My family is very supportive. My kids love going to ribbon cuttings and parties and all of that. So my youth allows me to do a whole lot more than what I think other people could do in the past.
So I think I saw that you just delivered your State of Escondido address.
I will in September.
Oh, that's right.
They wanted me to do it like 3 weeks after I got put in. I was like, I don't know what the state of the city really is, so let's just wait. So yeah, we'll do that in a couple weeks.
How long is your term?
4 years.
4 years, 4-year term. It's great that your kids are excited and involved, and maybe you'll put some sparks of inspiration for future Maybe this will become a multi-generational role.
Hey, we'll see.
We'll have to see what that's like. What do your greatest or harshest critics say about you?
That's a good question. Well, nobody says it to my face.
Right.
So there's that.
Or what do you think they say, or what have you heard through the Escondido's big but small, like most places, right?
Very small town vibe when you're there.
Yeah.
Very good old boys club.
Yeah.
You know what? Other than comments I occasionally see online, I don't really have a lot of that. And I say that humbly and thankful. But again, during the campaign, it was all those things I mentioned. And now, listen, I was determined once I got in to work my butt off so everybody would take me seriously. And it seems as though now they do.
That's great too. And I think most critiques that come in online, we should all ignore them. We should all ignore the good things that come in online and the bad things.
Don't
just
read the comment section online. And if you use Twitter, use that mute button all the time. It works.
It's just I was listening to this will probably get me in trouble, but I'm a Joe Rogan fan.
Hey, likewise.
I'm a Joe Rogan fan, and so I was listening. He always says, he's like, I never read my comments.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can imagine his comments, right? Millions of them. He's like, it's just an endless cesspool of just useless time wasting stuff.
I don't know who said it, but somebody recently said, and I repeat this in my head all the time, your haters are never doing better than you are. So let them hate.
That's right. That's a good approach. Can you talk a little bit about Sandag? Not everybody even knows what Sandag is, but Escondido, a little while ago, you mentioned this idea of kind of collaboration across cities, right? That Escondido, income-wise, is less prosperous than other cities in the county, for example, and cities need to work together. Can you describe, A, what Sandag is, and then B, what a mayor's role is in that and why it's important?
Absolutely. So Sandag is the San Diego Association of Governments, and it's basically the governing body for the roads and public transportation in San Diego County is the best way I could describe it. What it's supposed to be is it's supposed to have a board of directors that is made up of the mayor from every city. And somewhere along the lines that changed to simply a representative from every city. And it's a very, very political and controversial because how many cities are there? I think there's like 18 or 20, maybe 21 governing board members, of which I am one. I represent the fourth largest city in the county. And it's a mess. It's such a headache. You know, for me specifically, North County is so much different than the rest of the county. We're not San Diego. We are much more spread out. And public transportation is a very difficult thing to figure out up there because of the way that we're set up in North County. But because of Sandag, the region is taking this approach of whatever works for the city of San Diego or Chula Vista should just work for everybody else, and it doesn't. And unfortunately, the voting on this particular board of directors is, they do a regular tally vote. So maybe, there were 11 yeses and 10 noes, so the yeses won. But then there's what's called the weighted vote. So every city is given a handful of votes based off their population. The only problem with that is that the city of San Diego has like 42 of those votes out of 100, and then Chula Vista has another 8. So they control everything that happens in the county if they want. So a regional approach to transportation, while it might make sense at a very surface level, it's just not working out for the rest of us. And even in my city, as soon as I got there, I became the representative, and then I find out about this plan to remove 2 lanes off of one of the major arterial roads in Escondido and make them dedicated bus lanes for a very, very small amount of people who use the bus. It's just asinine. And my question is, too, in that situation, why aren't we taking advantage of technology? Why are we using these big buses to haul around 6 people? Why not autonomous fleets or Teslas or something that gets us what we want to reach our greenhouse gas emission goals and serves the general public? I don't know, but that's just me. And I could rant on about Sandag for an hour.
It's been over the years, Sandag will kind of come and go in the public consciousness, and something will flare up. Or they'll get a new executive director, or there'll be a little dust up about one thing or another. And I can imagine that. So Sandag is narrowly focused on transportation. Is that it's
very much so?
Yeah. It'd be great if that level of, well, the intent to collaborate would extend to other issues, right? This, again, not to return too much to the theme of homelessness, but, you think about adjoining cities and what happens in one city vis-a-vis services and compared to an adjacent city, and how that impacts National City in Chula Vista, or you got, I'm pointing that nobody can see, I'm pointing to the Coronado Bridge here. There are different perspectives on why Coronado has no homeless folks on it, and some people will say it's so well run, and other people will say they all got shipped across the Coronado Bridge. Listen, and it's hard to get back.
I really like Richard Bailey. That guy was so supportive during the campaign, and he did not have to be.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of people that email me and say, look, Richard Bailey, doesn't allow any homelessness, and I'm like, look, if you build me a bridge to keep people out of the city or keep them from walking, and then you make the other side an 8-mile hike. Yeah. I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, and you're not talking about hundreds and hundreds either, right? You're just talking about a few.
Yeah.
And they really stand out.
And you mentioned the regional approach with Sandag, right? So I am going to take us back now to homelessness. Yeah. Again, we're taking this one-size-fits-all approach with the answer. And right now, one of the things that I'm dealing with is the county's plan to implement their harm reduction strategy program. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
So I was notified 3 days before public comment on this closed that the county, who owns a building in my city, is going to run a harm reduction services program through a mobile delivery service out of this building. And what they will be delivering is, well, first, harm reduction seeks to reduce the stigma associated with substance abuse, and it also seeks to lower the rate at which certain STIs are transmitted, primarily AIDS and hepatitis. So they are going to deliver needles, condoms, lube, crack pipes, weed pipes, fentanyl test strips, and other things as needed to the homeless in my community, with no expectation. Their own grant application says that there is no expectation to return used needles. And this is their answer to the problem. And again, you heard me say just a little while ago, I'm not opposed to people getting off drugs slowly. I'm not opposed to clean needles. But a delivery service in a city that's already struggling with dirty needles in our parks and open space, this is what's being forced upon us by the county. This is their answer to the problem. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
So that's a county supervisor's decision?
Yes. It's a very controversial decision. It was a 3-2 vote, and they didn't consult any of the cities, and they're putting 2 locations in North County. Each location is in a city at the end of the Sprinter station, so you're asking for problems.
So ostensibly the idea would be that folks show up there and get whatever they want.
Correct.
And then that's it. They just go their merry way.
They say that they're going to have an outreach team, but my question is, without additional resources available, what is an outreach team going to do? And if they still don't have a shelter, what is this going to do? I get the idea of giving people clean needles. Oh, this is what cracks me up. Not just clean needles. They're going to give them a personal sharps container, because the person shooting up fentanyl that leaves the needle dangling in their arm when they pass out is going to be responsible enough to utilize a personal sharps container. And this is what I mean. Unless you've been through the cycle of addiction yourself, you just don't understand that you literally don't have the ability to make rational decisions. The very first step to recovery is admit that you yourself are powerless to overcome your addiction and that your life has become unmanageable. You can't manage your life. You can't manage a personal sharps container.
You're not focused on storing the needle so no one else gets pricked.
Exactly.
Wow. I'm going to have to after this interview, I'm going to Google the harm reduction program. And who's your county supervisor?
Jim Desmond.
Jim Desmond.
Who Jim has, just yesterday, I was on his show talking about harm reduction. He had a press conference in Oceanside the other day. He's been very supportive in sort of bridging the gap of communication between me and the county, in hopes that, look, they're probably not going to reconsider the program altogether, but at least work with cities to decide what you want handed out in your own community.
Mayor White, who are your inspirations and role models? You've had a colorful life, even at your young age, and you've had some real dark moments and some people who've helped you. But where do you find your inspiration and your hope and your role models every day?
I'll go back to the gospel. Joining the church, it hasn't just provided me with a moral compass that helps me make decisions on a day-to-day basis, but it's taught me what I believe is the purpose of life and beyond this life. And then with role models, my parents and I did not get along growing up. That's for sure. But everything is great. It's better than it's ever been now. And although my dad has had his own issues in life, the thing that I've learned from my dad is no matter how hard things are, you need to put in the work. My dad is the hardest worker I know. And what hard work has done for me is given me the ability to do this. It's given me the ability to do anything that I want to do in this life. But then beyond that, my father-in-law has taught me what it is to be just a good person, and to believe in yourself, and to believe that it's okay to have morals and guiding principles, and they need to remain constant. And he and my mother-in-law have taught me what it is to have a family. Because my dad had 2 kids before he got with my mom. He's back with his first wife now. I've been through 6 marriages with my parents. So it's not like I had this.
Not all him.
No.
On both sides.
3 and 3.
3 and 3, okay.
So I didn't have that really strong family unit growing up, and that's what they've done for me. But beyond that, I can't necessarily think of a single individual, but I would say those are the main things.
It's, family is incredibly important and endlessly complicated.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
And endlessly complicated. And anybody who tells you that they don't have a complicated family is just not. They're either really young or they're not telling you the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all about the long game. And I'm sure they're all very proud of you and what you've become. I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything? I have one last question for you, but before I get there, is there anything that we have not touched on today that you'd like to mention about your city? Your hat says Escondido, City of Choice. Perhaps you tell us why people should choose Escondido, or maybe there's something else that has been kicking around in your head that you wanted to share with us before we wrap.
You know what? Anytime I have an opportunity to say what I want to say, it's this. Politics has destroyed everything. It's destroyed our ability to cope with one another and to live peacefully. And whenever you have the chance to listen to somebody else, take that opportunity. Listen. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes and think, why do they think that way? Why are they making the decisions that they make? Try to meet people in the middle, because we're not always right and we're not always wrong. And the most important thing for all of us to remember is that we are all in this together no matter what. Don't not talk to somebody because they're a Republican or because they're Democrat. We all have common interests and common goals. It's just a matter of finding those and building upon it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's one of the perspectives that I try to maintain even on this show, right? I've interviewed people across the spectrum and some folks who I might not see eye to eye on with everything, but we end up at the end of the conversation going, hey, I think we both agree on that and that and that. So as humans. So the last question is hypothetical. Well, you're the mayor, so this may actually happen at some point.
Uh-oh.
You get to design a billboard. And let's see, it's probably going to be off of the 15. That would be probably the best freeway. So you get to Mayor White gets to have a billboard on the 15 freeway that people see as they drive by at allegedly 65 miles an hour. That's if there's CHP on the shoulder watching them.
Yeah.
What does that billboard say to people about your philosophy on life, on the work that you've committed to, and anything else you'd like to convey?
That's an interesting question. Man, I'd have to think about that. I don't know. What would yours say?
Wow, you turned that one around. I think mine would say the battlefield reports are seldom accurate.
Well, that's good.
And by that, I mean that and I have not, full disclosure, I've not been in the military, but I see so many instances where we see or hear something in the heat of the moment, whether it's a 140 character tweet, or we hear something through another person at work, or something in the family, and we react. Oh my God, the world's ending. And then when you actually, if you slow down and you sift through, you actually find out that most of the details of what you heard in the beginning weren't even true. And it gets back to this thing about assuming that the other is wrong. If you really sit down with someone and have a conversation, if you didn't know the name, if you didn't have the concept of a Democrat or Republican in your head, and you just met somebody at a cafe and you happen to start chatting with them and you find out you have a lot of common ground and then you have a couple of things you don't agree on, that's just a human conversation. But if you were to hear these, you watch either Fox or CNN, C-SPAN, right? That's battlefield reports, right? That's, Biden and he wants to cancel student debt and I paid my debt, so forget. Or on the other side, he's stealing classified documents and he's assaulting women. And it's like the truth and the reality is way more nuanced, and I think that's where the truth lies in life. So that would be my billboard.
You know what's interesting about that, and then I'll give you my answer.
Okay.
Like everyone else, I watch the news, I read stories, I get my information from wherever I get it from. But after I got elected to the school board, and especially now that I'm mayor, I've learned that they never get it right.
Right.
I've given you an exact quote, and you managed to screw it up. Yeah. So, I 100% agree with that. I think mine would say something simple to the effect of do good and be good.
Do good and be good. Mayor White, it's been a real pleasure to have you on today. And again, thank you for venturing outside of your city to come to our city. If I were the mayor, I would look forward. If I were the mayor of San Diego, I'd look forward to collaborating with you, because I think you have fresh ideas and a new approach, and you're not afraid to ruffle some feathers because you have your eye on a prize that goes beyond just political expediency. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on and for letting me share my story and my thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.